Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today, as part of my B-Tier guides, I'm going to take you through a build guide for Shale from Dragon Age Origins. Shale is a stone golem who was added to Origins through the Stone Prisoner DLC, even though she was actually supposed to be a companion in the base game. As a golem, she has unique abilities in addition to warrior talents, and I find it very fun to take Shale along in my party because she can be very versatile, providing all sorts of utility for the party, while at the same time being a very good tank. She doesn't have as many total talents as a regular party member, and in some ways that can feel limiting, but I think her ability design is unique and well balanced, so she ends up being far more versatile than the other companions. As with all followers, I recommend you recruit Shale as soon as possible if you want to use her, because if you recruit her at a later level, you will have to deal with the game's shitty attribute autoscaling. The Honleith village area you recruit her from is perfectly suitable to travel to immediately after you finish up in Lothering, as the combat isn't too difficult in there, so it's quite easy to recruit Shale early on. And as a great bonus, you get to pick up some good DLC items from Honleith as well. Of course, if you have the Dane's Fixes mod, in particular the follower autoscaling tweak that doesn't autoscale companions past level 7, or alternatively a respecialization mod, then you can recruit Shale later on since you'll still be able to spend her attribute points wisely. Without further ado, let's get into the build. Shale's starting abilities are more geared towards her warrior talents as well as the more aggressive talents. From the warrior tree, she starts out with Powerful, Threaten, Precise Striking, and Taunt. From her unique tree, she starts out with Pulverizing Blows, Slam, Quake, then Stoneheart, Bellow, Stone Roar if she's level 12, Rock Mastery if she's level 8, Hurl Rock if she's level 9, Earthen Grasp if she's level 13, and finally Stone Aura if she's level 10 and Inner Reserves if she's level 11. Since I'll be talking about how to utilize all of Shale's talents in various situations, I will talk about her talents in the recommended abilities section. Shale doesn't use conventional weapons or armor. Similar to the dog, she only has 2 equipment slots, one for small crystals which act as weapons, and one for large crystals which act as armor. When you recruit her, Shale only has a large chipped spirit crystal equipped. It's not very useful. I recommend switching it to a large natural or fire crystal as soon as you can, because fire and nature damage tend to be encountered a lot more often. Even with the crystals being low tier for now, it's still a better bonus than spirit resistance. Throughout Honleith Village and Wilhelm's Cellar, you should find a good amount of small and large crystals as loot. Of course, if you have the DLC active, you also have a chance to find crystals for Shale either from enemy drops or containers. I even managed to get a crystal to drop in the Human Noble origin from killing one of Howe's soldiers. Shale's crystals have attribute requirements of Strength and Constitution, Strength for small crystals and Constitution for large crystals. Due to this, you will need to add to Shale's Strength and Constitution whenever she levels up pretty evenly. In order to be able to equip the highest tier crystals, Shale needs to have 38 Strength and 38 Constitution. However, keep in mind that the highest tier crystals, the brilliant ones, will only begin to drop around level 19 and onwards, so you don't need to rush to get to 38 in the early and mid game. After you reach 38 Constitution, don't put any extra points in there since it mainly just gives plus 5 HP per point, so it's not as useful as Strength and other attributes. Other than Strength and Constitution, I recommend adding some points into Willpower and Magic. For Willpower, I recommend having a score of somewhere around 20 for the Stamina so that Shale can use her abilities fairly often, especially because she has 2 sustained ones she always wants up, and she has various active talents that require quite a bit of stamina as well. Finally, Magic is an attribute I recommend you put a few points into, up to a score between 13 and 15, because it makes healing poultices and spells more effective. If the character's magic is a little higher, you don't have to waste your money on more expensive poultices or the ingredients to make them. You can just use the cheapest poultices, and healing spells will pretty much always heal the character up back to max HP. You don't need to put any points at all in Dexterity or Cunning. Shale will be very tanky from having a lot of HP as well as other bonuses from her crystals and talents, so she doesn't need the defense from Dexterity, and Cunning doesn't do anything useful for her. Let's talk about Shale's abilities. First off, she has warrior talents, which are great for your tank needs. In particular, you are interested in Powerful, Threaten, and Bravery from the first row, and optionally Death Blow, and Taunt from the second row. Powerful is a great warrior passive for its bonus to health and reduction of fatigue. Threaten is a must-have sustained that taunts nearby enemies and draws enemy aggression away from the warrior's allies. You should have this up at all times on Shale, even if you use her more as a damager. Bravery is a passive that grants bonuses to physical and mental resistance as well as damage. There is also a proportional increase to critical chance based on the number of enemies above 2 that are engaged with the warrior. Death Blow is a passive which makes it so that when Shale kills an enemy, some of her stamina gets restored. This talent is optional because it's only useful if you use Shale as a damager with pulverizing blows. Finally, Taunt is a great activated talent that taunts nearby enemies, increasing their hostility towards the warrior. This is a useful talent for Shale in most situations, as you will want her to draw away enemy aggression both with the sustained threaten, as well as sometimes actively with Taunt. Now let's get into Shale's unique talents. Shale has 4 rows of unique talents. Each row is related to a specific type of role she can play in the party. The first ability in each row is a sustained talent that allows Shale to use the rest of the abilities in the same row. You can only have one of these sustained abilities active at a time, so you'll have to switch between them if you want Shale to be able to use talents from a different row. The first row has the sustained pulverizing blows, and it's related to Shale acting as a damager in your party. Of course, she's more tanky, so don't expect the most amazing damage out of her. She's going to be similar to a sword and shield damager. Pulverizing blows by itself gives Shale a bonus of +5 damage and -10 defense, but its bonuses increase as you unlock more of the talents in the same row. In total, after you've unlocked all of the abilities in this row, Shale will have +11 damage, +3 armor penetration, and -10 defense. The bonus to damage is really good, as is the armor penetration. If you want to use Shale as a damager, I recommend you unlock the whole row, because it's best to have everything unlocked for the best bonuses. In terms of which active abilities to use, I recommend mainly using Slam and Killing Blow, and only rarely using Quake. Slam is a great damaging ability that also has a knockback effect which can interrupt enemies like revenants and even ogres without allowing any resistance check to avoid it. Killing Blow is an automatic crit if it hits, but be aware that using this ability means that if it does hit, then Shale's stamina will also be drained, and the number is added to the damage dealt to the target. I found that this talent does a good amount of damage, especially if Shale is equipped with a small crystal that gives her the appropriate element to damage an enemy, and she has a good amount of stamina when she uses it. Quake is a talent I don't recommend using most of the time because it causes 3 damaging shockwaves around Shale that also knock targets back, and friendly fire is possible for both the damage and knockback. Apparently in the base game the knockback effect isn't implemented, but I've been playing with Dane's fixes for a very long time, so I have to tell you that it feels horrible to use this talent if you have any party members near Shale, because they will get damaged and they will also be interrupted. If you have Shale fighting a group of enemies separately from the other party members, then it's fine to use this since the damage and knockback are good. Moving on to the Stoneheart row. This is my personal favorite, as it makes Shale a lot tankier, and that's how I like to use her most of the time. The Stoneheart Sustained has +3 armor and +5% to elemental resistances as a base, and then just like Pulverizing Blows, when you unlock the other talents in the row, you get extra effects added to Stoneheart. In my opinion, the total bonuses you get from Stoneheart when the row is maxed out are the best for a tank Shale. +12 armor, +20% elemental resistances, +6/+12 health regeneration, and +3/+6 stamina regeneration. I absolutely recommend both unlocking and using all the talents in this row. Bellow is an activated talent very similar to the dog's Dread Howl or the mage spell Mind Blast, stunning all nearby enemies around Shale in a 6-meter sphere unless they pass a mental resistance check versus Shale's strength. Any source of crowd controlling enemies is very useful, especially stun or paralyze effects. Stone Roar is essentially a weaker taunt since it only affects one enemy, drawing threat from that target and causing it to be more likely to attack Shale. Even though it's weaker than taunt, you can use this in a pinch if you're waiting for taunt to come off cooldown. Regenerating Burst causes Shale to explode with energy, damaging all nearby enemies and stunning them unless they pass a physical resistance check. If they do pass the check, then they're just knocked back. Furthermore, it provides Shale with some extra health regeneration for 10 seconds, which is a really good effect to have on top of the existing bonuses she gets from the Sustained. Finally, we're getting into what I consider the much more situational rows of talents, Rock Mastery and Stone Aura. The Rock Mastery tree is only worth it if you have archers in your party. The archers are the main damagers, and you essentially have everyone else just supporting them. Rock Mastery by itself is a sustain that grants Shale +40 missile deflection, -5 armor, -10 defense, and -10% critical chance, so really mostly just negatives. However, it does grant the entire party +5% ranged critical chance. Just like the other rows, unlocking the other talents in the row adds extra effects to Rock Mastery. With the row maxed out, the total modifiers are, for Shale, 50 missile deflection, -5 armor, -10 defense, -10% critical chance. And for the party, +10% ranged critical chance, and -2.0 seconds aim speed. The bonus to ranged critical chance is huge, so it is indeed great to use if all you're looking for is buffing your archers. However, you do also need to take into consideration that Shale will be significantly less tanky in melee combat, so you will have to take care of her HP more. If that's a trade-off you're okay with, then you should absolutely use this to buff your archers. Hurl Rock throws a rock to the target, dealing damage in a 5-meter radius sphere. Creatures in the area of effect are knocked down unless they pass a physical resistance check against Shale's strength, and friendly fire is possible. As always with things that can knock down your allies, if you're going to use it, please make sure that there are no allies nearby, or if they are, that they are immune to knockdown effects, or you could also try to aim it precisely so that it doesn't hit your allies. Earthen Grasp immobilizes enemies for 10 seconds in a 6-meter radius sphere around Shale, unless they pass a physical resistance check versus Shale strength. This one is really useful and reliable for crowd control as it's activated quickly, has a nice range and a long duration, and even elite and boss monsters have a hard time resisting it. Rock Barrage throws multiple rocks in the air that crash down in the targeted area, dealing damage and slowing creatures within it. The duration is 20 seconds, and targets are knocked down unless they pass a physical resistance check versus Shale's strength. Friendly fire is possible. If you want to make good use of this talent, you can combine it with the mage spell Earthquake if you cast it without any allies in the area. One of the big elemental spells on top of this, like Blizzard, Inferno, and Tempest, would also be a good addition since they would add extra damage to the slowed and possibly knocked down enemies in the area. Finally, we come to the Stone Aura tree. Some would argue that this is the best sustained to use on Shale as it gives huge bonuses to the party, but I put it in the situational category because it requires more setup to do it properly. Not everyone will have the patience to take the time to set up everything just right, and then go back to readjust things later on in combat. The idea behind Stone Aura is that Shale activates a support mode that gives nearby party members various bonuses, but also renders Shale immobile. The aura's radius is 10 meters. The Stone Aura itself gives Shale a -50 to defense, -10 stamina regeneration, and paralyzation. The party gains a bonus of +5 attack, +5 defense, and +2/+4 health regeneration. With the whole row maxed out, the aura grants in total the following bonuses. For Shale, +15 armor, +25% spell resistance, -50 defense, -10 stamina regen, and the aforementioned paralyzation. For the party, +10 attack, +10 defense, +10 spell power, +5% critical chance, both melee and ranged, +3 armor penetration, +3 damage, +4/+8 stamina or mana regen, +6/+12 health regen, and +4% spell resistance. The aura also debuffs all enemies within its range, imposing -5 attack and defense, as well as reducing their movement speed. You can also combine Stone Aura with the mage spell Force Field to make Shale immune to damage. The Stone Aura bonuses are indeed huge, but you also have to ensure that each time your party members move out of the area to go attack enemies further away, you turn off the Stone Aura, follow them with Shale, and then turn it on again. I used this aura for a while in the beginning, but it got old really fast, and while the bonuses were nice, I just couldn't be bothered to keep adjusting things. If you're okay with micromanaging to this extent, then I agree that it is the most powerful sustained overall, both buffing your allies and debuffing enemies. The other 3 talents, Inner Reserves, Renewed Assault, and Supernatural Resilience, are all passives which offer the extra bonuses for Stone Aura. After a long but much needed discussion about Shale's talents, we can move on to gear. As I mentioned earlier, Shale only has 2 slots for gear, one for a small crystal acting as a weapon, and one for a large crystal acting as armor. There are 5 elements of small crystals: fire, ice, lightning, nature, and spirit. Each elemental crystal comes in 5 tiers of power, similar to the material tiers in weapons and armor. From weakest to strongest, we have chipped, flawed, clear, flawless, and brilliant. At higher tiers, small crystals will require Shale to have more strength to be able to equip them, but these higher tiers are absolutely worth it, as they are not only adding extra base damage, but also other bonuses to the crystal. The important thing to understand about Shale's special weapons is that they turn all the damage Shale deals with her attacks and talents to the element associated with the crystal, so the small crystal you choose is very important because of enemies' resistances and possible immunities. Due to this, I recommend having at least 2 different elements you can equip on Shale so that you don't get in a sticky situation where Shale either does too little damage or worse, can't damage an enemy at all due to the weapon crystal she's wearing. I'm going to remove the worst option out of the equation first, the natural crystal. It turns Shale's damage into nature damage, and unfortunately, nature damage is the most resisted type by enemies. Due to this, I'd recommend selling whichever small natural crystals you find because they aren't worth using. There's also another type which isn't that useful, the Spirit Crystal. The higher tiers of this give bonuses to all attributes, armor penetration, and to spirit damage. The bonuses to all attributes aren't really what I think Shale needs, as she really mainly just focuses on strength and constitution. Spirit damage is alright against most enemies, but no enemies have spirit vulnerabilities as far as I know, so it's not the best damage type. That leaves us with fire, ice, and lightning. Fire crystals are the best since Darkspawn and Undead have fire vulnerabilities and you will get to fight a lot of them throughout the game. Sylvans are also vulnerable to fire. There are some enemies with fire resistances or immunities of course, such as demons, so for those you will need a different element. The bonuses of higher tier fire crystals are extra melee critical chance, plus to all weapon damage, and extra fire damage. Fire crystals are more suitable for doing extra damage, combining well with Shale's pulverizing blows roll, but I think that even if you use Shale as a tank or to support archers, it helps to do extra fire damage to enemies vulnerable to it. I only recommend the ice crystals if you're using Shale as a damager with pulverizing blows and you're dealing with enemies resistant or immune to fire. They offer bonuses to cold damage, armor penetration, and critical or backstab damage. Finally, the lightning crystals give bonuses to dexterity, attack, and electricity damage. If you mainly use Shale as a tank with Stoneheart, then this is a good weapon since you care more about her having high defenses, which are provided by the bonuses to dexterity. Her damage being converted to electricity is very nice for utility since the electricity damage also drains stamina from enemies. My general recommendations then are fire and lightning with ice as a possible third option. As a note, if you are planning to only use Shale for her stone aura, then you could actually use the natural crystal because it offers bonuses to constitution and health regen in combat, and in this particular case you won't care that Shale does nature damage because she won't actually be doing any damage since she'll just stand still to buff her allies and debuff enemies. Let's move on to Shale's armor, aka large crystals. These are also divided into the same amount as the small crystals, 5 elements, and 5 tiers of power. Large crystals have constitution requirements, so as I mentioned in the attributes section, you should have 38 constitution to be able to equip the highest tier large crystals. The lightning crystal is in my opinion the best choice due to its chance to dodge attacks and chance to avoid missile attacks, and it also offers bonuses to dexterity and lightning resistance. The natural crystal is the second best for tankiness, offering nature resistance, physical resistance, armor, and constitution. I find fire crystals to be a bit underwhelming. I just don't think the bonuses are as good as the lightning and natural ones, but you may find these useful when fighting enemies who do a lot of fire damage, such as rage demons or archers with fire arrows. The ice crystal is bugged if you don't have the Dane's Fixes mod because it offers a bonus to healing effects received. That effect doesn't work in the base game at all, so you have to use the mod to make it work. If you do have Dane's Fixes, then the ice crystal becomes a good option for a tank or support Shale due to its bonuses to health regen, defense, and healing effects received, as well as cold resistance. The Spirit Crystal is the most situational and thus the worst in my opinion. It offers spirit, spell, and mental resistances and small bonuses to all attributes. I only recommend using this in combats where you're facing off against multiple spellcasters due to the spell resistance, and there aren't that many such fights. The other bonuses aren't that useful, especially the spirit resistance. In general, I recommend lightning and natural large crystals, and as a third option the ice ones only if you have Dane's Fixes installed, otherwise as a third option you could use fire. Finally, you should know that there is also an added bonus of plus 10% to the specific elemental resistance if you have both a small and large crystal of the same element. In my opinion, this bonus is minor, so don't feel like you need to match the element of Shale's crystals. It's just a little bonus that's nice to have, but not at all necessary. In terms of where to acquire crystals for Shale, other than the early ones you will loot from Honleith, as well as whatever you can find in random drops, there's only one merchant I know who sells crystals for sure, and that is Garen in the Orzammar Commons. The great thing about his shop is that he will sell really good quality crystals, so you can check his inventory when you're level 19 and onwards to see if he has brilliant crystals for sale. In terms of tactics, I've already mentioned how and in which situations to use Shale's abilities, so just as a quick recap, Shale should always have the Threaten Sustained active to draw enemy aggression away from her allies. She can also use Taunt and or Stone Roar as activated talents that draw enemies to attack her. If you want Shale to act as more of a damager, you want her to have Pulverizing Blows active and use Slam and Killing Blow on high priority enemies such as elites, bosses, and enemy spellcasters. If you want Shale to buff your archers, then you can use the Rock Mastery row, and it's pretty great to combine Rock Barrage with spells like Earthquake, Blizzard, Inferno, and Tempest if you have a mage in the party. If you just want to use Shale as a regular tank, I recommend the Stoneheart row. All the abilities in there are useful either to taunt enemies with Stone Roar or to stun them with Bellow or Regenerating Burst. Perfect utility for tanking. Finally, if you for some reason find it fun to use Shale as a literal statue that you only occasionally move around, you can use Stone Aura to buff allies and debuff enemies within range. As I always do, in terms of party composition, I recommend a balanced approach. At least one tank, one damager, melee or ranged, one mage, and the fourth party member can be anything out of the roles already mentioned, though I recommend not having more than 2 melee characters in the party, as it can get a bit too crowded, especially in interior areas where everyone is trying to attack the same enemy in melee, and they just get stuck trying to position to be able to attack. Of course, in particular contexts, such as a more archer-focused party, if you want to use Shale's Rock Mastery, I'd recommend having Shale, a supporter mage, and at least one archer if not 2, to make good use of the great bonuses to archery. But I really don't like to tell you exactly what party you should have with you in the game, other than to have a balanced one and to take into consideration the builds you are using when deciding your party. In conclusion, Shale is a surprisingly versatile warrior companion who can fulfill multiple roles in the party with her unique talents, and unlike with other companions, you can quite easily switch between these roles as long as you have the talents you want to use unlocked. Obviously, she becomes more versatile as the game goes on and she levels up, so early in the game I recommend focusing on one of the roles she has multiple points in and then unlocking what you would prefer to use next. I hope you enjoyed this character build guide for Shale in Dragon Age Origins. If you're looking forward to seeing more Dragon Age videos, as well as videos on other RPGs, do remember to subscribe and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.